Before they became the most physical and baddest team ever, the Detroit Pistons had a different identity. They were one of the most entertaining teams to watch. They were an offensive-friendly team that could run up the scoreboard. From an individual standpoint, this is where Isiah Thomas was at his best. It's time that we shine a spotlight on the forgotten era of Detroit Pistons basketball. Before his arrival, they were looking for a savior. They were a respectable team in the 70s, led by Bob Laimbeer. But this era ran its course, and they traded him away mid-season in 1980. They only won 16 games that year, and they won 21 games in 1981. This allowed them to receive the number 2 pick in the 1981 draft. They were ecstatic to receive Isiah Thomas, the player who just led the University of Indiana to a national championship. He was a proven winner, and this was the type of player they needed to turn this franchise around. But this wasn't the only major draft pick they made. They also had the 12th pick, and they selected Kelly Tripucka. With these two new additions, they were going to improve drastically on offense after finishing with the lowest points per game average. But then, in the middle of the season, they made two moves that were going to take this team to another level. They traded Greg Kelser for Vinnie Johnson. They also traded Phil Hubert and Paul McKeskey for Bill Laimbeer. Now they had a squad that the city of Detroit could be excited about. Even with all these young players, take a look at the turnaround they made. They went from 22 wins to 39. They went from being dead last in points per game to the 6th highest in the NBA. The coaching staff wanted this team to run, and they had the roster to score with the best of them. Let's introduce you to this strong core of players. We start with John Long. He was best known for his scoring. There is nothing more automatic than his mid-range jumper. He could score from long range, but also create his own shot in the painted area. He was great at coming off screens and curling for a jumper. It was a style that complemented Isiah's game well. But he was only one of the many capable scorers that this team had. There was also Kelly Tripucka. This is the poster boy of an 80s athlete. But don't let his looks fool you. He averaged over 20 points per game in 4 of the 5 seasons that he was in Detroit. In 1983, he proved that he was an elite scorer. He averaged 26.5 points per game on 49% shooting. That was the 3rd highest in the league. There were 8 times that he scored over 40 points during those 5 years. That includes a 56-point performance he had against the Chicago Bulls in 1983. His scoring prowess allowed him to be named an All-Star twice. If that's not impressive enough, they also had this guy coming off the bench. If you look up the definition of instant offense, you'll surely see the picture of Vinnie Johnson. The microwave could get hot from the field at a moment's notice, and the scoring would come in bunches. It didn't matter how tightly he was guarded or how little separation there was between him and his defender. He had the ability to score against the most smothering defenses. It was common for him to score over 20 points while coming off the bench. This was a dangerous backcourt. Their frontcourt was dangerous in more ways than one. Bill Laimbeer was their star center. You might not like that term, but he was selected to be an All-Star 4 times. He was one of the most unique players in the NBA, not just for the extracurricular activities that he found himself in, but for his style of play. He didn't play a traditional big man's game. He had no post moves, and he wasn't a great shot blocker. He scored the majority of his points from the perimeter. In some games, he was their best outside threat. He was also an incredibly skilled rebounder. This is a guy who is not known for his athleticism. He couldn't jump, and he has been described as having concrete feet. But he finished in the top 5 in rebounds for 5 straight seasons. In 1986, he was first with a 13.1 rebounds per game average. You might not have respected him as a player, but he had plenty of game. On the other hand, the player that everyone loved and respected was Terry Tyler. This was their designated rim protector. For 5 straight seasons, he averaged over 2 blocks per game. He was one of the top shot blockers, despite only being listed as 6'7". There was even a game in 1982 where he posted 9 blocks against the Bulls. On top of that, he was extremely dependable. For his 7 seasons with the Pistons, he never missed a single game. And to bring it all together, we have one of the greatest point guards the league has ever seen. Isiah Thomas wasted no time and making his mark in the game. John Long sang his praises in his rookie season. He described him by saying this: "It's just amazing what he can do with the ball. If you're open for a split second, that's all he needs. It's just so unusual what he can do. He has the ability to carry us all by himself. It's a thinking man's game, and he knows how to think." End of quote. He proved how smart a player he was in his sophomore season. He told the New York Times that he needed to change the way he played. At first, he was looking to set other guys up and fulfill what his coach, Scotty Robertson, wanted him to do. He knew he needed to be more aggressive. He concluded by saying, "I was going to play my way, not somebody else's way." In the 1983 offseason, the next big change that the Pistons made was naming Chuck Daly as the head coach. His first line of business was to put the ball in Isiah's hands and let him create. The rest is history. I believe it was no accident that they improved by 12 wins by letting Zeke completely take over the offense. They won 49 games and they had the 5th best record in the league. This version of Isiah Thomas was one of the most exciting players in the game. He was always in attack mode, and there wasn't a single player who could stay in front of him. You were at his mercy. He was the best ball handler in the league. He had tremendous court vision, and he was one of the most skilled passers ever. From 1984 to 1986, he finished second in assists behind Magic Johnson, and he was the assist leader in 1985. But the difference between him and Magic is that he was a better scorer. Did you know that he is one of 3 players to average over 20 points and 10 assists in 4 consecutive seasons? He's in the same company as Oscar Robertson and Russell Westbrook. He might not have been the triple-double machine that they were, but he was impacting the game in ways that they couldn't. There have only been 10 times in history that a player's averaged over 20 points, 10 assists, and 2 steals for a season. Isiah has done it 3 times. No one has done it more than him. That's what made him so special. Despite being considered an undersized guard, he was not a liability on defense. He could hold his own on that end of the floor. The best example of his greatness surely came in the 1984-85 season. This is where he made history. He averaged the insane stat line of 21.2 points on 46% shooting, 13.9 assists, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.3 steals per game. That is the 3rd highest assist per game average for a single season ever. Only John Stockton has produced a higher average, except that he wasn't scoring at that rate. There were 5 times that season when he posted over 20 points and 20 assists, which is the most ever. If he wanted to, he could have been the most statistically dominant point guard ever. That's how skilled he was at that position. But he held himself back because winning was far more important. He did an incredible job of directing the offense. For example, in the 1983-84 season, they finished with the highest offensive rating and the 3rd highest points per game average. They averaged 117.1 points per game. In the following season, they also finished 3rd in points per game. This version of the Pistons wasn't physical and rugged. They were fast-paced and extremely entertaining. If you liked high-scoring games, this was the team to watch. There's no better example than their matchup against the Denver Nuggets in 1983. They still hold the record for scoring the most points by a team in NBA history. In a triple overtime thriller, the Pistons won with a score of 186 to 184. They had 3 players who scored over 30 points. It should not be a surprise that this team holds the scoring record. They were that explosive on offense. But the question is, would all that scoring translate to playoff success? They had a few noteworthy moments. We start with the first playoff appearance of the Isiah Thomas era in 1984. It's Game 5 against the New York Knicks. This is where Isiah had one of the most clutch performances in playoff history. He scored 16 points in the last 91 seconds of regulation, and they were able to force overtime. Then, in 1985, they were able to reach the semifinals. They faced the defending champions, the Boston Celtics, and they played them tough. It was a hard-fought 6-game series. Game 4 was a Vinnie Johnson game. He scored 22 of his 34 points in the 4th quarter. That includes this double-clutch shot that sealed the victory for Detroit. However, These were the only playoff highlights for Isiah's first 5 years. They only won one playoff series during that span. The problem is that they weren't a great defensive team. For those 5 years, they finished 11th, 14th, 16th, 9th, and 15th in defensive rating. The numbers say that they were mediocre on that end of the floor. It was easy for players to have their way against them. In the 1984 series against the Knicks, Bernard King averaged 42.6 points per game on 60% shooting. In the 1986 first-round series against the Atlanta Hawks, Dominique Wilkins averaged 34.3 points per game on 47% shooting. That includes a 50-point performance he had in Game 2. As great as they were on offense, this was not a championship-caliber roster. Isiah knew this, and he was getting frustrated. There were even reports that he was considering retirement due to frustration over the Pistons' play and an injury to his knee during the 1986 season. It's clear that changes needed to be made. This year marked the end of the Isiah, Kelly Tripucka, and John Long era. That was the year they drafted Joe Dumars and traded for Rick Mahorn. In the offseason, they traded Kelly for Adrian Dantley. They also traded John for draft picks, and they drafted both John Salley and Dennis Rodman. They still had plenty of capable scorers, but they now had a defensive identity. They had the pieces necessary to win, and Isiah took full advantage. This was the team that everyone hated/loved. But the team that Isiah started with still holds a special place in basketball lore. But what about you all? What do you remember the most about this team? Why do you think they couldn't get it done in the playoffs? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.